Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if the moment after intimacy tells you more about his soul than the intimacy itself? What if the shocking truth is not that he feels nothing afterward, but that he feels too much? Because for the divine masculine, intimacy is not always something he can leave behind in the body. Sometimes, after the closeness ends, something begins inside him. A silence, a replay, a wave of tenderness he did not expect. A strange emotional exposure that makes him wonder why this moment is still living in his chest long after it has passed. He may not say it. He may act composed. He may even pull away. But that does not always mean he is empty. Sometimes the distance after intimacy is not the absence of feeling. Sometimes it is the first sign that he has been touched in a place he does not know how to protect anymore. Because what happens after intimacy can reveal what he was never ready to admit before it. Did he only want the moment? Or did the moment awaken something deeper? Did he feel satisfied? Or did he feel seen? Did he leave feeling powerful? Or did he leave feeling strangely vulnerable, emotionally exposed, and quietly changed? That is the shocking truth we are going into today. Because after intimacy, the divine masculine may discover that what he thought was physical was actually emotional. What he thought was desire was actually recognition. And what he thought he could control may have opened a doorway into his heart, his fear, his longing, and the soul truth he has been trying not to face. So if you have ever wondered what he truly feels after intimacy, especially when his words are few, his silence is confusing, or his energy suddenly shifts, stay with me. Because what he feels afterward may be far deeper than what he is brave enough to say. And once intimacy touches the soul, nothing inside him stays simple. Chapter 1. Why the moment after intimacy reveals more than the moment itself. The moment after intimacy often tells the truth he cannot say. That is where this journey begins. Because during intimacy, the divine masculine may be able to stay inside desire. He may be able to follow the pull, respond to the chemistry, surrender to the heat of the moment, and tell himself that what is happening is physical, natural, instinctive, and easy to understand. But after intimacy, something changes. The body becomes quiet. The room becomes still. The energy settles. And suddenly, he is no longer protected by the movement of desire. Now he has to feel what the closeness awakened. That is why the moment after intimacy can reveal more than the intimacy itself. Because while desire is active, he can hide inside it. He can let passion explain everything. He can stay in the language of attraction and avoid asking what the attraction is touching underneath. He can tell himself, this is just chemistry. This is just the body. This is just the intensity of the moment. But afterward, the truth has more space to rise. And that truth can be shocking. Not because he expected to feel nothing, but because he did not expect to feel this. He may not have expected the silence to feel heavy. He may not have expected your energy to linger. He may not have expected tenderness to follow desire. He may not have expected the moment to stay inside him after the moment was over. That is where the first crack appears. Because if it were only physical, why does it remain? If it were only desire, why does it feel emotional afterward? If it were only a moment, why does his inner world feel slightly different once the moment has passed? These are the questions he may not ask out loud. But he feels them. He may lie beside you and seem quiet. He may look calm. He may even seem distant. But inside, there can be an entire emotional process beginning that he does not yet know how to name. A process where the body has already experienced closeness. But the heart is only now beginning to understand what that closeness meant. This is what many people misunderstand. They think intimacy reveals everything during the act itself. They think the passion, the intensity, the desire, or the way he reaches for you is the clearest sign of what he feels. And yes, those things can reveal something. They can reveal attraction. They can reveal hunger. They can reveal chemistry. They can reveal the force of the pull. But they do not always reveal the depth. Depth often reveals itself afterward. In the pause. In the way he holds you. in the way he avoids your eyes, in the way his breathing changes, in the way he becomes unusually quiet, in the way he wants to stay close, but also seems afraid of what staying close might expose. Because after intimacy, the divine masculine is no longer only dealing with desire. He is dealing with consequence, emotional consequence, spiritual consequence, the consequence of being touched in a place that was not supposed to be touched. And this is where he may become confused. He may have entered the moment believing he knew what he wanted. He may have thought he was following attraction, fulfilling desire, moving through something intense but manageable. But afterward, when the fire slows down, he may realize the connection did not leave him feeling empty or finished. It left him feeling open. And openness can frighten him. Because openness means something entered. Something passed through the physical and reached the emotional. Something made him feel less guarded, less separate, less in control of the story he was telling himself. That is why the after moment matters so much. Because during intimacy, the ego can still pretend. After intimacy, the soul starts speaking. And the soul speaks differently. The ego says, that was desire. The soul says, then why do you feel changed? The ego says, it was only physical. The soul says, then why does her presence still echo inside you? The ego says, you can control this. The soul says, then why are you afraid of how close you feel? This is the hidden battle that can begin inside him after intimacy. A battle between what he wants to call it and what it actually awakened. He may want to call it passion, but the tenderness afterward tells another story. He may want to call it chemistry, but the emotional stillness tells another story. He may want to call it a moment, but the way it follows him into silence tells another story. And that story can unsettle him deeply. Because the divine masculine has often been taught how to desire more easily than he has been taught how to feel. He may know how to move toward what attracts him. He may know how to respond to intensity. He may even know how to be confident in the physical realm. But emotional exposure is different. Emotional exposure asks him to admit that something mattered. It asks him to acknowledge that he was not only physically present, but emotionally affected. It asks him to recognize that your closeness did not simply satisfy something in him. It awakened something. An awakening is rarely comfortable at first. This is why he may act strange afterward. He may become quiet, not because he feels nothing, but because he feels more than he expected. He may create distance, not because the intimacy meant nothing, but because it meant too much too quickly. He may seem emotionally unreadable, not because there is no emotion there, but because the emotion has reached a depth he does not yet know how to translate into words. This is the shocking truth. Sometimes the man who seems calm after intimacy is the man whose inner world has just been disturbed. He may be replaying the moment in ways he cannot explain. Not only the physical part, but the emotional atmosphere, the softness, the surrender, the trust, the way your energy felt when the guards came down, the way he felt seen without having to perform, the way the closeness made something inside him feel both peaceful and exposed. That combination can be overwhelming. Peace and exposure, desire and vulnerability, satisfaction and longing, closeness and fear. All of it can rise after intimacy. And when it rises, he may not know what to do with it. Because if he admits the truth, he has to admit that intimacy reached beyond the body. He has to admit that something about the connection affected him emotionally. He has to admit that the moment did not end when the physical closeness ended. It continued inside him. That is what he may not be ready to say. He may not be ready to say, I still feel you. He may not be ready to say, that touched something deeper in me. He may not be ready to say, I thought I only wanted the moment. But now the moment is making me feel things I did not expect. So he may say nothing. But silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence is the first language of a man who has been emotionally reached before he has found the courage to admit it. This is why you cannot always measure what he feels by how quickly he speaks afterward. Some men speak to avoid feeling. Some men go silent because feeling has become too real. Some men become tender but careful. Some men become distant but inwardly stirred. Some men act unaffected while privately carrying the imprint of the connection for much longer than they ever admit. The moment after intimacy reveals this split. The outer man may try to return to normal. The inner man may know something has changed. And that change is not always dramatic. It may be subtle, a strange quietness, a new tenderness, a sense that ordinary distance no longer feels ordinary, a recognition that the person beside him is not just someone he desired, but someone who reached him. That is the difference. Desire reaches the body. True intimacy reaches the hidden self. And when the hidden self is reached, the divine masculine may begin to feel exposed in a way that is difficult to explain. Not exposed because something bad happened. Exposed because something real happened. Exposed because his guard dropped. Exposed because the connection revealed a need, a softness, a longing, or an emotional hunger he may have spent years trying to keep buried. This is why the moment after intimacy is so powerful. Because it asks the question he may not be ready to answer. Was this just pleasure? Or was this recognition? Was this just closeness? Or was this a mirror? Was this just desire? Or did something in him finally feel safe enough to come alive? That is why the after moment can feel sacred and terrifying at the same time. Sacred because it carries truth. Terrifying because truth always asks something of him. It asks him to stop hiding behind desire. It asks him to stop reducing intimacy to the body. It asks him to notice what changed in his heart when he allowed someone close enough to touch the places he usually protects. And if he is not ready for that level of honesty, he may retreat into the safest explanation. He may tell himself it was physical. He may tell himself not to overthink it. He may tell himself he can move on, stay detached, keep control, remain unchanged. But the soul knows when something real has happened. The soul knows when intimacy became more than contact. The soul knows when desire became tenderness. The soul knows when the body opened a door the heart was not prepared to walk through. And that is why he may feel different afterward. Not because intimacy created something from nothing, but because intimacy revealed something that was already waiting underneath. A longing to be met. A longing to be accepted. A longing to be close without armor. A longing to be felt without needing to explain everything. That is the deeper truth of Chapter 1. The moment after intimacy reveals more than the moment itself because it removes the distraction of desire and leaves him alone with what desire awakened. It shows him whether the connection ended at the body or continued into the heart. It shows him whether he can return to emotional distance or whether something inside him has already crossed a threshold. And once that threshold has been crossed, nothing feels as simple as it did before. Because after intimacy, he may begin to realize that the most powerful part was not only what happened between two bodies. It was what happened inside his soul. And when the soul has been touched, silence becomes louder. Distance becomes heavier. Memory becomes more alive. And the man who thought he could keep everything under control may find himself standing at the edge of a truth he cannot fully escape. That is where this story begins. Because the moment after intimacy is not empty. It is where the hidden truth starts breathing. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for Chapter 2. Because next we are going deeper into the silence he falls into after feeling too much. And why his quietness after intimacy may not be the absence of emotion, but the first sign that he is overwhelmed by what the connection has awakened inside him. Chapter 2. The silence he falls into after feeling too much. His silence after intimacy can feel like rejection. That is where this chapter begins. Because from the outside, silence is easy to misunderstand. It can look cold. It can feel confusing. It can make you question the entire moment that just happened. One moment there was closeness, warmth, intensity, surrender. And then suddenly he becomes quiet. His energy shifts. His words become fewer. His eyes look far away. His presence is still there. But something inside him seems to have retreated into a private room you cannot enter. And you may wonder, did I imagine the depth? Did the intimacy mean less to him than it meant to me? Did he get what he wanted and then emotionally disappear? But what if that silence is not always emptiness? What if sometimes silence is what happens when a man feels more than his nervous system knows how to hold? because the divine masculine does not always process intimacy through immediate words. He may not know how to turn emotional impact into language right away. He may feel something real, something tender, something disarming, and yet the very depth of that feeling can send him inward instead of outward. Not because he does not care, but because he does not know how to stay open while being seen in the depth of what he feels. That is the hidden truth of this chapter. Sometimes his silence is not the closing of the heart. Sometimes it is the heart trying to understand what just opened. After intimacy, especially intimacy that reaches beyond the physical, he may enter a strange internal stillness. The body has already crossed a threshold. The emotional field has been stirred. Something in him has been touched, softened, awakened. But his mind may not have caught up yet. His old identity may not know what to do with the level of exposure he has just experienced. So he goes quiet. And in that quietness, he may be feeling everything he does not have the courage to say. He may be feeling the weight of closeness, the shock of tenderness, the vulnerability of being wanted and received, the fear of needing more of what he just experienced, the strange ache of realizing that this was not as casual as he expected it to be. That is why the silence can feel so heavy. Because it is not neutral. It is full of everything unsaid. He may lie there beside you and seem distant, but inwardly he may be replaying the emotional truth of the moment. Not only what happened physically, but how it felt to drop the armor. How it felt to be close without performing. How it felt to let his body speak before his pride could interfere. How it felt to experience a kind of softness that did not make him feel weak in the moment, but terrifies him afterward because of how much he liked it. That is the part he may not know how to admit. He may not know how to say, "I felt safe." He may not know how to say, "I felt seen." He may not know how to say, "Something about that reached me." He may not know how to say, "I am quiet because I do not know how to return to who I was before this." So instead, he says nothing. And silence becomes the container for a truth too vulnerable to speak. This is where many hearts get hurt. Because when he becomes silent after intimacy, it can activate fear. It can make you feel exposed too. It can make you wonder if the closeness was one-sided. It can make your mind search for signs, replay his tone, analyze his breathing, study the distance between what happened and what he is now showing. But the deeper question is not only, why is he silent? The deeper question is, what is his silence protecting? Is it protecting indifference? Or is it protecting vulnerability? Is it hiding emptiness? Or is it hiding emotional overwhelm? Is it the silence of a man who feels nothing? Or the silence of a man who has just felt something he cannot control? Because those silences can look similar from the outside. But energetically, they are very different. The silence of indifference feels flat, empty, disconnected. There is no emotional charge inside it. No tenderness, no heaviness, no inner conflict. It simply feels absent. But the silence of overwhelm feels different. It has weight. It has tension. It has emotion under the surface. It may feel like he is there and not there at the same time. His body may be close, but his mind has stepped back to understand what just happened. His heart may be affected, but his old defenses are already rising to protect him from being too visible. He may want to reach for you, but another part of him may fear that reaching would reveal too much. That inner split creates silence. Because one part of him wants to stay. Another part wants to hide. One part wants to rest in the tenderness. Another part wants to regain control. One part knows something meaningful happened. Another part is already trying to reduce it, explain it, or place it back into a safer category. This is why he may become difficult to read after intimacy. Not because there is nothing to read, but because there is too much happening at once. And when too much happens inside a man who has not learned how to be emotionally transparent, silence becomes his first instinct. He may not have been taught how to say, "I am overwhelmed." He may not have been taught how to say, "This closeness made me feel vulnerable." He may not have been taught how to say, "I do not know why I feel emotional after something I thought I could keep physical." So his system does the only thing it knows. It shuts down the outward expression while the inward experience continues. This is important, Because emotional shutdown is not always emotional absence. Sometimes it is emotional overflow. When a man has spent years training himself to stay composed, to stay rational, to stay unreadable, to not need too much, to not reveal too much, intimacy can expose the places where that training begins to fail. And when it fails, he may not instantly become open and expressive. He may become still, quiet, guarded, almost frozen by the amount of truth rising inside him. This is why the silence after intimacy can be one of the most revealing stages of all. Because if he felt nothing, there would be nothing to protect. But when something has entered him deeply, the old protections may rise quickly. He may become silent because he is trying to keep the moment from becoming too real. He may become silent because words would make the truth undeniable. He may become silent because he senses that if he speaks from the softness he feels, he will reveal a part of himself he has not yet accepted. And that part is tender. More tender than his pride wants you to see. This is the tenderness of a man who may have wanted the body, but did not expect the heart to follow. The tenderness of a man who may have thought he was entering pleasure, but found himself standing at the edge of emotional recognition. The tenderness of a man who suddenly feels the difference between being physically close and being truly touched. That difference can shake him. Because true intimacy does not only satisfy desire, it removes distance. And distance may have been his protection for a very long time. So after intimacy, when distance has temporarily disappeared, he may feel naked in a deeper way than the physical. Naked in his longing, naked in his need, naked in his softness. Naked in the truth that he was not as detached as he wanted to be. That is where the silence comes from. It is the silence of a man trying to put his armor back on after realizing how much relief he felt when it came off. And that realization can be frightening. Because if the armor felt heavy before, he could ignore it. But after intimacy gives him even one glimpse of what it feels like to be met without armor. Returning to the old self may feel more painful than before. He may not understand why. He may only know that something inside him feels unsettled. Why do I feel exposed? Why do I feel softer? Why do I feel like this moment is still with me? Why does her presence make my silence feel so loud? These questions may move through him without words. And because he does not know how to answer them, he may withdraw into himself. This is where silence becomes both shield and prison. It shields him from immediate vulnerability. But it also traps him with the truth he refuses to express. Because the feeling does not disappear simply because he does not speak it. The tenderness does not vanish because he acts composed. The emotional imprint does not leave because he avoids naming it. In fact, the silence can make it stronger. Because now everything he feels has nowhere to go except deeper inside. That is why he may become even more affected after he pulls inward. He may think silence gives him control. But sometimes silence gives the soul more room to speak. In the quiet, he may begin to feel what desire covered. In the quiet, he may notice how much the intimacy mattered. In the quiet, he may realize that your closeness was not only exciting, but strangely calming, strangely familiar, strangely meaningful. In the quiet, the truth becomes harder to outrun. And yet, he still may not say it. Because saying it would require courage. It would require him to cross from feeling into confession, from inner truth into outer vulnerability, from private recognition into relational honesty. And for a man who is still learning how to trust emotional openness, that crossing can feel enormous. So he may stay quiet. But the silence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the next layer. Because after the silence comes the replay. After the stillness comes the inner questioning. After the emotional overwhelm comes the attempt to understand why the intimacy did not stay in the body, why it moved into memory, why it touched the heart, why it left him feeling both satisfied and strangely incomplete. Incomplete because the body had the moment, but the soul wants the meaning. That is the part he may not understand yet. He may think he is quiet because the moment is over. But sometimes he is quiet because something deeper has just begun, a deeper awareness. A deeper longing, a deeper confrontation with the parts of himself that have been waiting to be awakened through closeness. And that is why his silence after intimacy can be so confusing. It may look like withdrawal. But inside, it may be the first sign of emotional awakening. The divine masculine may fall silent after feeling too much because silence is the only place where he can temporarily hide from the truth of his own response. He is not always ready to be held accountable to the depth of what he feels. He is not always ready to let you see that the intimacy did not simply touch his body. It touched his hidden heart. And when the hidden heart is touched, a man often needs time to recognize himself again. Because something has shifted. The old distance is no longer as convincing. The old control is no longer as complete. The old story that this was just physical is no longer as easy to believe. That is the power of intimacy when it reaches the soul. It leaves silence behind it. But not empty silence. A charged silence. A sacred silence. A silence filled with everything he has not yet learned how to say. And maybe the deepest truth is this. His silence after intimacy does not always mean he felt less than you. Sometimes it means he felt more than he was ready to reveal. So do not only listen to the absence of words. Listen to the energy beneath them. Listen to the heaviness. Listen to the tenderness he tries to hide. Listen to the contradiction between the closeness you felt and the distance he suddenly creates. Because sometimes the contradiction is the confession. Sometimes the silence says, I felt something. It scared me. I do not know how to hold it yet. But I cannot pretend it did not touch me. That is where chapter 2 leaves us. With the understanding that silence is not always the opposite of feeling. Sometimes silence is the first shelter feeling runs into when it has become too powerful, too intimate, too revealing, and too close to the truth. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for chapter 3. Because next we are going deeper into why physical closeness can become emotional exposure. And why the moment he thought would only awaken desire may be the very moment that reveals the most vulnerable parts of his hidden heart. Chapter 3. Why physical closeness can become emotional exposure. Physical closeness is not always only physical. That is where this chapter begins. Because the divine masculine may enter intimacy believing he understands what is happening. He may believe he is responding to desire, chemistry, attraction, or the natural pull between two people. He may think the body is leading and the heart can remain safely behind. He may tell himself that closeness does not have to mean vulnerability. That passion does not have to become emotional truth. That the moment can stay contained inside the physical. But sometimes the body opens a door the heart was not ready to walk through. And that is when physical closeness becomes emotional exposure. This is the part he rarely expects. He may know how to want. He may know how to touch. He may know how to move toward desire. He may know how to surrender to intensity. But he may not know what to do when the closeness starts revealing him. Because true intimacy does not simply bring two bodies closer. It can bring hidden emotions closer to the surface. It can soften places inside him that have been defended for years. It can bypass the part of him that knows how to perform confidence and reach the part of him that still wants to be safe, accepted, wanted, and emotionally received. That is why intimacy can become so unsettling afterward. Not because the physical closeness was wrong, but because it became too honest. There is a kind of intimacy that does not stop at the body. It enters the emotional field. It reaches the nervous system. It touches memory. It stirs old longing. It brings up the need to be seen without armor. And when that happens, the divine masculine may realize he has not only shared a physical moment. He has revealed a part of himself. Maybe not through words. Maybe not through confession. Maybe not through a conscious decision. But through presence. Through the way he surrendered. Through the way he became softer. Through the way his control loosened. Through the way something in him trusted, even for a moment. Through the way his body told a truth his mouth would never have admitted. And that can frighten him. Because emotional exposure is not always something he chooses. Sometimes it happens before he can stop it. Sometimes the connection moves faster than his defenses. Sometimes your presence makes him feel safe enough to open. And only afterward does he realize how much of himself became visible. That realization can shake him deeply. He may think, why do I feel exposed? He may think, why does this feel so personal? He may think, why do I feel like she saw something in me I did not mean to show? He may think, why does this closeness feel more powerful than the physical moment itself? These questions are signs that intimacy has crossed into emotional territory. Because when the body is the only thing involved, the experience may be intense, but it does not usually threaten the inner identity. It may leave pleasure, memory, attraction, maybe even longing. But when the hidden heart becomes involved, the experience starts carrying a different kind of weight. It becomes more than something he did. It becomes something that showed him who he is when his armor falls. That is why physical closeness can feel dangerous to him. Not dangerous because of you. Dangerous because of what he becomes near you. Softer. More open. Less defended. More human. More reachable than he planned to be. And for a man who has learned to survive by staying composed, that kind of reachability can feel like a loss of control. This is one of the deepest masculine fears around intimacy. Not the fear of desire itself, but the fear that desire will lead him into emotional territory where he cannot remain hidden. The fear that closeness will reveal need. The fear that being wanted will awaken the part of him that wants to be loved. The fear that the physical moment will uncover a deeper hunger he has tried for years to deny. Because underneath desire, there is often another question. Can I be received? Can I be safe here? Can I be wanted without having to perform? Can I be close and still be accepted when the mask slips? He may never say these questions out loud, but intimacy can awaken them. This is why the moment after physical closeness may feel so charged. Because something primitive and something sacred may both be alive in him at once. The body remembers pleasure. The nervous system remembers safety. The heart remembers softness. The soul remembers what it feels like to be met without pretending. And then fear enters. Because if he felt safe, he may begin to need that safety. If he felt seen, he may begin to crave that seeing. If he felt accepted, he may begin to realize how long he has been living without it. If he felt emotionally touched, he may begin to understand that the physical moment was only the surface. That is emotional exposure. It is the moment intimacy reveals a need he did not want to admit. And many divine masculines are far more afraid of need than they are of desire. Desire can still feel powerful. Need feels vulnerable. Desire can still be framed as strength. Need can feel like surrender. Desire can still let him believe he is in control. Need reminds him that someone has reached a place in him that control cannot protect. That is why he may become conflicted after intimacy. One part of him may feel drawn closer because the connection felt real. Another part may feel threatened because real means vulnerable. Real means affected. Real means he cannot pretend he remained untouched. Real means the closeness did something to him that he cannot easily reduce to chemistry. And this is where emotional exposure becomes difficult to hold. Because he may not only feel exposed to you, he may feel exposed to himself. He may see his own longing more clearly. He may see his own tenderness more clearly. He may see how much he wants to be held emotionally, not only physically. He may see how tired he is of being guarded. He may see that the part of him that looked strong from the outside has been craving a place to finally rest. That kind of self-recognition can be overwhelming. Because sometimes the most frightening mirror is not the other person. It is the version of yourself that appears in their presence. And if he becomes someone softer with you, someone more open, someone less protected, someone more emotionally alive, then he has to face a painful question. Was I really strong before? Or was I just defended? That question can disturb him. Because it challenges the entire identity he may have built around control. The identity that says a man should be able to want without needing, touch without being changed, feel without revealing, leave without carrying an imprint, stay composed even after something sacred has moved through him. But true intimacy does not honor those old rules. True intimacy enters where control cannot follow. It reaches the places he has hidden from the world, and sometimes even from himself. It may awaken tenderness beneath pride, grief beneath desire, longing beneath confidence, a quiet need for emotional safety beneath the masculine role of always seeming steady. And after that, he cannot fully pretend not to know. He may try. He may become quiet. He may pull away. He may act casual. He may tell himself it was only physical. He may reduce the moment to something simpler than it was. But the body remembers what the heart felt. The heart remembers what the soul recognized. And the soul knows when physical closeness has become a doorway into emotional truth. This is why he may behave differently afterward. He may look at you differently. He may avoid looking at you altogether. He may become softer, then suddenly guarded. He may want to hold you, then suddenly need space. He may seem deeply present one moment and emotionally far away the next. That is not always manipulation. That is not always indifference. That is not always proof that the moment meant nothing. Sometimes it is the nervous system of a man trying to recover from being emotionally exposed before he was ready. Because being exposed does not always mean being embarrassed. Sometimes it means being revealed. And being revealed can feel terrifying when he has spent so much of his life believing that the deepest parts of him must remain hidden to be safe. So he may ask himself without words, why did I let go like that? Why did I trust her energy? Why did I feel so much peace afterward? Why did I feel more naked emotionally than physically? Why does this closeness make me feel like she knows something about me? These questions do not come from shallow desire. They come from intimacy that has touched identity. And that is when physical closeness becomes a threshold between the man he performs and the man he truly is. A threshold between desire and tenderness. A threshold between control and surrender. A threshold between the body's craving and the soul's deeper recognition. Once he crosses that threshold, even briefly, he may not know how to return to the old version of himself without feeling the difference. Because now he knows what it felt like to be close without hiding completely. Even if it scared him. Even if he cannot say it. Even if he tries to deny it afterward. Something in him knows. And that knowing is powerful. It may become the reason he pulls closer. It may become the reason he pulls away. Sometimes it becomes both. Because the very thing that feels healing can also feel threatening when he is not ready to receive it fully. Your closeness may have given him peace. But peace can expose how long he has lived in survival. Your tenderness may have felt beautiful. But beauty can expose how guarded he has become. Your presence may have made him feel safe. But safety can expose how unsafe he has felt for so long. That is the deeper reason physical closeness becomes emotional exposure. It does not only show him what he feels for you. It shows him what has been missing inside him. And when he sees that, he may need time to understand why intimacy has left him feeling not only satisfied, but stirred. Not only close, but vulnerable. Not only connected, but strangely seen in places he never planned to reveal. This is where the shock begins. Because he thought intimacy would give him an experience. But instead, it gave him a mirror. A mirror of his longing. A mirror of his fear. A mirror of his hidden softness. A mirror of the emotional hunger he may have buried under independence, confidence, work, distraction, and control. And now he has to decide what to do with what has been revealed. Will he honor it? Will he hide from it? Will he reduce it to desire? Will he let it become truth? That is the inner crossroad. Because once physical closeness becomes emotional exposure, the divine masculine can no longer honestly say that nothing happened inside him. Something did happen. Something opened. Something softened. Something became visible, even if only for a moment. And sometimes a moment is enough to change the way a man understands himself. That is why this chapter matters. It reveals that intimacy is not always about what he receives from you. Sometimes it is about what he cannot hide from you. Or even more deeply, what he cannot hide from himself after being close to you. The shocking truth is this. He may not be afraid of intimacy because it means too little. He may be afraid because it reveals too much. It reveals that he wants more than the body. It reveals that he is softer than he appears. It reveals that his desire may be carrying emotional need. It reveals that his heart has been waiting behind the armor. It reveals that he can be reached. And once a man realizes he can be reached, he is standing at the edge of transformation. Because being reached means the wall is no longer absolute. Being reached means the old distance has failed. Being reached means someone has touched the place in him that still remembers how to feel. That is not just physical. That is sacred exposure. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for chapter 4. Because next we are going deeper into what he replays when he is alone, and why the memories that stay with him after intimacy may reveal the emotional truth he is still trying to hide. Chapter 4. What he replays when he is alone. What he replays afterward is not always the part you think. That is where this chapter begins. Because when people think about what a man remembers after intimacy, they often imagine that he replays only the physical details. The closeness, the desire, the heat, the way the body responded, the intensity of the moment. And yes, he may remember those things. But when the intimacy touched something deeper, that is not all he remembers. He remembers the feeling, the atmosphere, the softness, the silence, the way your energy met his, the way the moment did not feel empty after it ended, the way something in him became quiet, open, and strangely honest. That is the part he may not admit. Because the divine masculine can often confess attraction more easily than he can confess emotional memory. He may be able to admit that there was chemistry. He may be able to admit that the physical connection was strong. He may even be able to admit that he still thinks about it. But what he may not say is that he is not only thinking about what happened. He is thinking about how he felt with you. And that is a much more vulnerable truth. Because physical memory can still feel safe to admit. It stays in the category of desire. It sounds simple. It sounds masculine in the old way. It allows him to say, I wanted that, without having to say, I felt something there that reached me. But emotional memory is different. Emotional memory carries meaning. It carries the way he felt when the world became quiet. It carries the way his guard lowered before he could stop it. It carries the way your presence made him feel received instead of judged, held instead of inspected, wanted instead of demanded from. And when he is alone, that is often what returns. Not always as a clear thought. Sometimes as a sensation. Sometimes as a mood. Sometimes as a sudden ache. Sometimes as a quiet replay that enters his mind when he was not looking for it. He may be driving home. He may be standing in the shower. He may be lying in bed with the lights off. He may be sitting in silence after a long day, trying to return to ordinary life. And then it comes back. Not only your body, your eyes, your voice, your stillness, the way you looked at him when the mask was gone. The way he felt like he did not have to perform for one brief, dangerous moment. That is what can shake him. Because when intimacy is only physical, the memory may fade into satisfaction. But when intimacy carries emotional truth, the memory does not fade the same way. It stays alive. It changes shape. It becomes softer, heavier, more meaningful in the quiet. It begins asking him questions. Why do I keep thinking about this? Why does this feel different from other moments? Why do I remember the tenderness more than the intensity? Why does her presence feel like something my body remembers, but my heart cannot explain? These are not casual questions. They are the beginning of recognition. Because what he replays in private often reveals what affected him most. And sometimes what affected him most was not the passion. It was the peace. It was not only the desire. It was the safety. It was not only the closeness. It was the feeling of being seen without needing to defend himself. That is the hidden truth. He may replay the moment when you softened toward him. He may replay the way you trusted him. He may replay the quiet after. He may replay how his own body relaxed. He may replay the strange feeling that something inside him was allowed to stop fighting. And that can become more powerful than the physical memory itself. Because a man can find desire in many places. But emotional safety is rare. And when the divine masculine experiences emotional safety inside intimacy, he may not know what to do with the memory of it. It may feel beautiful, but also dangerous. Beautiful because it gave him something his soul has been hungry for. Dangerous because now he knows what he has been missing. That is why the replay can feel unsettling. It is not only memory. It is evidence. Evidence that he was affected. Evidence that he opened. Evidence that the connection reached deeper than he planned. evidence that he cannot honestly reduce the moment to the body alone. And when evidence appears inside him, denial becomes harder. He may still try to stay logical. He may tell himself it was simply a strong physical connection. He may try to file it away as attraction, chemistry, timing, intensity. He may try to return to his normal rhythm and act as if the moment was complete when it ended. But the replay says otherwise. The replay says something stayed. And that something may follow him in ways he does not expect. He may notice that ordinary distractions do not erase it. Work may not erase it. Noise may not erase it. Other conversations may not erase it. Even distance may not erase it. In fact, sometimes distance makes the replay sharper, because when you are not there, the memory has more space to speak. And what does it say? It may say, you felt safe there. It may say, you felt wanted there. It may say, you were softer there. It may say, you were more honest there than you have been in a long time. That can be hard for him to hear. Because if he admits that, then intimacy becomes more than an experience. It becomes a mirror of his inner life. It shows him what he longs for. It shows him what he has not allowed himself to need. It shows him the part of him that has been living behind emotional walls and calling those walls strength. So he may resist the replay. He may push it away. He may distract himself. He may become busy. He may act colder than he feels. He may try to convince himself that thinking about it means nothing. But the body has its own memory. The nervous system remembers where it felt safe. The heart remembers where it felt touched. The soul remembers where it felt recognized. And when he is alone, those memories can return without permission. This is why what he replays after intimacy matters. Because his private memory may be more honest than his public behavior. Outwardly, he may seem controlled. Privately, he may be revisiting the moment again and again. Outwardly, he may say very little. Privately, he may be trying to understand why the connection still feels alive. Outwardly, he may appear detached. Privately, he may be carrying the emotional imprint of what happened. That contrast can be confusing, but it is very real. A man can be deeply affected and still not know how to show it. He can replay tenderness and still act guarded. He can remember closeness and still create distance. He can feel the emotional weight of intimacy and still try to hide behind silence. Because the replay does not immediately make him brave. Sometimes it makes him afraid. Afraid of what the memory means. Afraid of wanting it again. Afraid of needing that kind of closeness. Afraid that the moment revealed a hunger he cannot easily control. Afraid that one experience has touched a place he thought was safely closed. That fear can make him minimize. He may tell himself, it was just a moment. But then why does the moment keep returning? He may tell himself, it was only physical. But then why does he remember the emotional atmosphere? He may tell himself, I am fine. But then why does silence feel different now? This is where the replay becomes a teacher. It teaches him what his pride will not admit. It teaches him that what stays in the heart has meaning. It teaches him that the body may have entered the moment first, but the soul may have followed. It teaches him that some forms of intimacy do not end when two people separate. They continue as an inner echo. And that echo can be tender. It may not always come as longing right away. Sometimes it comes as stillness. Sometimes as confusion. Sometimes as a strange emotional softness he does not know where to place. Sometimes as the sudden realization that he misses not only the closeness, but the version of himself who existed inside that closeness. That is one of the deepest things he may replay. Not only you. Himself with you. The man he became in your presence. The man who softened. The man who trusted. The man who stopped performing. The man who felt more alive, more open, more human, even if only for a moment. That can be more powerful than desire. Because desire says, I want her. But emotional memory says, I became someone different with her. That realization can trouble him deeply. Because now the intimacy has shown him an alternative version of himself. A version not ruled by control. Not trapped in distance. Not constantly managing the mask. A version who can feel, receive, surrender, and be met. And once he has tasted that version, the old self may not feel as convincing anymore. That is why the replay can become painful. Because it does not only remind him of what happened, it reminds him of what is possible. It reminds him that there is a softer life underneath the guarded one. It reminds him that closeness does not have to mean danger. It reminds him that being seen can feel terrifying and healing at the same time. So when he is alone, he may be fighting two truths. One truth says, "This was beautiful." Another truth says, "This is dangerous." One truth says, "I want to feel that again." Another truth says, "If I feel that again, I may not be able to stay in control." One truth says, "She touched me." Another truth says, "Do not let anyone know how deeply." That inner conflict is exhausting. And yet, it is also part of awakening. Because the replay keeps bringing him back to what is real. It keeps showing him the emotional imprint. It keeps reminding him that intimacy, when it carries soul recognition, cannot be dismissed as easily as ordinary attraction. It does not simply fade into the background. It becomes part of his private world. He may hear a song and remember. He may pass a place and remember. He may feel a certain silence and remember. He may close his eyes and suddenly feel the emotional temperature of that moment again. Not because he is choosing to obsess, but because something in him recognized the connection before his mind could explain it. That is why he may become more careful after intimacy. Not because he forgot, but because he remembers too much. He remembers the closeness. He remembers the softness. He remembers how much he let down. He remembers that the moment did not feel empty. And the more he remembers, the harder it becomes to pretend nothing moved inside him. This is why his solitude matters. Because when he is alone, he cannot perform for you. He cannot manage your perception. He cannot hide behind conversation, touch, humor, confidence, or distance. He is left with himself. And in that private space, the truth often becomes louder. That is where he may realize, I did not just want the moment. I wanted the feeling inside the moment. I did not just want her body. I wanted the peace I felt with her. I did not just enjoy the closeness. I felt something in me open. That realization may not come all at once. It may come slowly in fragments through repeated memory. It may arrive as a feeling before it becomes a sentence. It may show itself through longing, confusion, resistance, or silence. But once the replay begins, the deeper truth has already started moving. Because what he replays is what still has power. And if he keeps replaying tenderness, safety, softness, and the feeling of being emotionally met, then the connection has gone beyond physical pleasure. It has entered the inner chamber of his heart. That is the sacred truth of Chapter 4. What he replays when he is alone is often the part of the intimacy that touched his hidden self. The part that made him feel safe. The part that made him feel seen. The part that made him feel more human than the old mask allowed. He may never describe it that way. He may never confess the details of what returns to him in silence. But the memory knows. The body knows. The soul knows. And sometimes, the soul keeps replaying what the ego is still trying to deny. That is why this stage matters so much. Because the replay is not just memory. It is the beginning of emotional truth becoming undeniable. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for Chapter 5. Because next we are going deeper into why he may pull away right after feeling close. And why the very intimacy that touches him deeply can also awaken the fear that makes him retreat. Chapter 5. Why he may pull away right after feeling close. He may pull away right after intimacy not because he felt nothing, but because he felt too close. That is where this chapter begins. Because from the outside, this is one of the most confusing patterns of all. One moment there is closeness, there is warmth, there is surrender. There is the feeling that something real passed between you. His energy may have softened. His body may have relaxed. His guard may have dropped. For a moment, he may have seemed more present, more open, more reachable than usual. And then suddenly something changes. He becomes quieter. He becomes distant. He takes longer to respond. He acts like he needs space. He seems to retreat from the very connection that just brought him close. And you may ask yourself, was it not real for him? Did I misunderstand the moment? Did he only want the physical part? Did closeness mean something to me that it did not mean to him? But what if the retreat is not always proof that the connection meant less? What if sometimes he pulls away because the connection meant more than he was prepared to hold? Because for the divine masculine, feeling close can be far more frightening than wanting. Wanting still allows him to feel like he has some control. Wanting can be explained. Wanting can be placed in the body. Wanting can be made simple. But closeness is different. Closeness enters the emotional field. Closeness removes distance. Closeness softens the armor. Closeness exposes the heart. Closeness makes the connection feel real in a way desire alone may not. And once something feels real, the stakes change. Now he is not only dealing with attraction, he is dealing with vulnerability. He is dealing with the possibility that your presence affects him. He is dealing with the fear that he may want more than a moment, more than intensity, more than something he can keep safely unnamed. That is when he may pull away. Not because he is untouched, but because he has been touched too deeply for his old defenses to feel safe. This is the contradiction that can hurt so much. The closeness awakens him. Then the awakening frightens him. The intimacy opens him. Then the openness makes him feel exposed. The connection gives him peace. Then the peace reveals how guarded he has been. So he retreats. And from the outside, that retreat can look like rejection. It can feel like emotional disappearance. It can make you question the entire energy of the intimacy. But inside him, the retreat may be less about losing interest and more about trying to regain control after feeling emotionally affected. Because when a man is used to managing himself through distance, closeness can feel like a kind of beautiful danger. It feels good. Too good. Soft. Too soft. Real. Too real. And if he does not trust himself inside that realness, he may step back from it. This is why he may pull away right after feeling close. The timing itself reveals the fear. He does not pull away because nothing happened. He pulls away because something happened that touched a part of him he does not know how to live from yet. Maybe he felt safe. Maybe he felt seen. Maybe he felt needed. Maybe he felt tender. Maybe he felt emotionally open in a way he has not felt in a long time. And afterward, that openness may feel threatening. Because openness asks him to remain honest. And honesty may ask him to change. That is the part he may not be ready for. If he admits that intimacy moved him, he may have to admit that the connection matters. If he admits that the connection matters, he may have to admit that he is no longer fully detached. If he admits that he is no longer detached, he may have to face the truth that his old self, the controlled self, the guarded self, the self that does not need too much, is no longer as strong as it pretended to be. That is a lot to face after one moment of closeness. So instead of moving deeper, he may move away. Not always consciously, not always cruelly, sometimes almost instinctively. His nervous system may reach for space before his heart can reach for words. He may not even fully understand why he is doing it. He may only know that the closeness made him feel something he cannot organize. And distance feels like the only way to breathe again. That is why his retreat can feel sudden. Because fear often arrives after softness. During the intimacy, he may be carried by the moment. He may not be thinking. He may not be analyzing. He may not be defending himself. The body leads. The energy moves. The closeness deepens. The heart opens before the mind has time to stop it. But afterward, the mind returns. And the mind says, "What was that? Why did I feel that much? Why did I let her so close? What if she saw too much of me? What if I want this more than I should? What if I cannot go back to feeling nothing?" That is when fear begins to rebuild the wall. Not because the heart did not open. Because it did. The wall comes back because the opening was real. This is why you may feel such a strange contrast. The intimacy may have felt deeply connected, but the aftermath may feel guarded. The closeness may have seemed undeniable, but the distance may make you doubt it. The energy may have said one thing, while his behavior afterward seems to say another. But sometimes contradiction is the language of a man in inner conflict. One part of him wants the closeness. Another part fears what closeness will require. One part wants to stay open. Another part wants to protect the old identity. One part remembers how peaceful it felt to be with you. Another part panics because peace can become need. And need is what he may fear most. Because desire can still feel powerful, but need can feel exposing. Desire says, I want. Need says, this matters to me. Desire lets him remain in control. Need reveals that something outside his control has reached him. That is why he may pull away from what he actually wants. He may not be pulling away from you as much as he is pulling away from the version of himself he became with you. The softer version. The open version. The emotionally honest version. The version that stopped pretending for a moment. The version that felt safe enough to want more than the body. That version can scare him. Because if he lets that version live, his life may have to change. His choices may have to change. His emotional habits may have to change. His relationship to vulnerability may have to change. And change can feel like danger to a man who has built his survival around control. So he may step back into the familiar silence, the familiar distance, the familiar emotional restraint, the familiar story that says, do not get too close, do not need too much, do not let anyone see how deeply you can be affected. But the problem is this. Once closeness has touched the hidden heart, distance does not feel the same anymore. He may create space, but the memory remains. He may act unaffected, but the emotional imprint stays. He may tell himself he is fine, but the silence begins to echo with what he is trying not to feel. That is why pulling away does not always bring him peace. It may bring temporary control, but not peace, because peace came from closeness. Control comes from distance. And now he has to choose which one he trusts more. That choice can create deep inner tension. He may miss the connection while avoiding it. He may think about you while not reaching out. He may crave the softness while resisting the vulnerability required to receive it. He may want the emotional safety he felt with you, but fear becoming dependent on it. This is the ache of the divine masculine after intimacy. He has tasted something real, but he may not yet feel ready to live honestly with it. So he pulls away. And the pulling away may not be clean. It may not be calm. It may feel charged, confusing, inconsistent. He may return, then retreat. He may soften, then become guarded. He may seem affected, then pretend he is not. He may give signs of depth, then hide behind surface behavior. Why? Because he is trying to regulate the intensity, not erase it. There is a difference. Regulation says, this is too much for me right now. Rejection says, this means nothing to me. And sometimes from the outside, those two can look painfully similar. That is why discernment matters. You cannot romanticize every silence. You cannot turn every distance into proof of depth. Sometimes a man pulls away because he is not emotionally invested. Sometimes he pulls away because he lacks maturity, honesty, or care. But in the specific energy of a soul-touched intimacy, the retreat often has a different quality. It carries tension. It carries heaviness. It carries unfinished emotion. It feels less like emptiness and more like fear. There is a difference between a man who disappears because he consumed the moment, and a man who retreats because the moment consumed him. One leaves with no echo. The other leaves carrying the echo inside him. And that echo can become louder in the distance. Because the further he moves from the closeness, the more he may feel what the closeness gave him. The calm, the softness, the emotional recognition, the sense that something in him was allowed to rest, the sense that the body was not the only thing being held. This is why distance can become painful for him too. He may have created it, but that does not mean it does not hurt. He may have stepped back, but that does not mean he stopped feeling. He may have chosen silence, but that does not mean silence feels peaceful. Sometimes the silence becomes the place where he has to face himself more honestly than he ever did in your presence. Because when he is with you, he can be carried by the energy. When he is away from you, he has to confront the absence. And absence often reveals what presence meant. That is a powerful truth. Presence can awaken desire. Absence can reveal attachment. Presence can open the heart. Absence can show him how open it became. Presence can feel beautiful. Absence can make him realize that beauty has left an imprint. And once he realizes that, his retreat becomes complicated. Because now distance is not simply protection. It is also loss. He may begin to feel the cost of pulling away. He may begin to understand that in trying to protect himself from vulnerability, he has also separated himself from something that made him feel deeply alive. He may begin to feel that the old safety is actually loneliness wearing armor. That is the deeper lesson. Sometimes he pulls away after intimacy because the closeness exposed the loneliness he had learned to live with. Your presence may have shown him what it feels like to be emotionally met. And once he has felt that, returning to emotional isolation may feel colder than before. But instead of admitting, "I miss that safety," he may simply become more conflicted. Because admitting he misses it means admitting it mattered. And admitting it mattered means admitting you reached him. That is the truth he is trying to avoid. Not because it is false. Because it is too revealing. So he may try to make the connection smaller in his mind. He may tell himself the intimacy was just intense. He may tell himself he needed space anyway. He may tell himself closeness is complicated. He may tell himself not to get carried away. But the heart knows when it has been touched. And the heart does not always obey the story the mind creates. This is why pulling away can become the very thing that proves the depth to him. Because distance gives him enough room to see what stays. If it was only physical, it may fade quickly. But if it was emotional, if it was soul level, if the intimacy reached the hidden self, then space does not erase it. Space reveals it. It reveals what follows him. It reveals what he misses. It reveals what he cannot reduce. It reveals what he still feels when there is no touch, no closeness, no immediate desire to explain it away. That is when the truth begins to form inside him. Maybe this was not just physical. Maybe I pulled away because I felt exposed. Maybe the closeness scared me because it felt safe. Maybe what I am avoiding is the very thing I actually want. Those realizations may take time. And he may resist them. But once intimacy has touched the soul, the deeper truth has already begun moving under the surface. That is why this chapter matters. Because it reframes the retreat. He may pull away right after feeling close, because closeness is not simple for a guarded heart. It awakens desire, yes, but also fear. It awakens tenderness, but also shame. It awakens longing, but also the old instinct to protect. And if he has not yet learned how to remain present inside emotional vulnerability, he may use distance as a temporary shelter. But shelter is not healing. Distance may help him feel in control, but it will not teach him how to receive love. Silence may protect the mask, but it will not satisfy the heart. Retreat may calm his fear, but it will not erase the truth of what intimacy awakened. And that truth is this. He pulled away because something came too close. Something real. Something tender. Something emotionally dangerous to the old self. Something that made him feel more than he planned to feel. And maybe the most shocking part is not that he retreated. Maybe the most shocking part is that the retreat does not mean the connection failed. Sometimes it means the connection reached the very place that still needs healing. Because the place that pulls away is often the place that does not yet know how to stay. The place that fears closeness is often the place that longs for it most. The place that runs from tenderness is often the place that has been waiting for tenderness the longest. And when he finally understands that, intimacy stops being something he runs from. It becomes something that teaches him. It teaches him where he is guarded, where he is afraid, where he is still confusing control with safety, where he is still mistaking emotional distance for strength. And slowly, if he is willing, it teaches him that the closeness he fears may be the very closeness his soul has been asking for. That is where chapter 5 leaves us. With the understanding that his retreat after intimacy is not always the end of feeling. Sometimes it is the beginning of his confrontation with feeling. Sometimes he pulls away not because the moment was meaningless, but because it was meaningful enough to expose the places in him that still do not know how to remain open. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for chapter 6. Because next we are going deeper into the tenderness he does not know how to name. and why the softest feeling that rises after intimacy may be the one he tries hardest to hide. Chapter 6. The tenderness he does not know how to name. Tenderness may be the feeling he hides the most. That is where this chapter begins. Because after intimacy, the divine masculine may know how to understand desire. He may know how to understand attraction. He may know how to understand the physical pull, the chemistry, the intensity, the hunger that brought him close. These are feelings he can place inside a familiar language. These are feelings that do not immediately threaten the old masculine identity. But tenderness is different. Tenderness does not arrive with force. It arrives quietly. It comes after the intensity, after the closeness, after the body has spoken, after the room becomes still, after he realizes that what he feels is not only desire anymore. Tenderness is the softness that remains when the fire has slowed down. And for many men, that softness is much harder to face than the fire. Because desire can still feel powerful. But tenderness feels revealing. Desire can be explained through attraction. Tenderness asks for emotional honesty. Desire says, I want you. Tenderness says, something about you matters to me. That is why he may not know how to name it. He may feel protective but not know why. He may feel peaceful but not know how to say it. He may feel moved but call it nothing. He may feel emotionally close but hide behind silence. He may feel a gentle ache in his chest and tell himself it is only the aftermath of the moment. But it is not always only the aftermath. Sometimes it is the beginning of emotional truth. Because when intimacy touches more than the body, tenderness often rises as the first sign that the heart has been involved. It may not be dramatic. It may not come as a confession. It may not look like a sudden emotional breakthrough. It may simply be there in the way his energy changes, in the way he becomes quiet, in the way his gaze softens, in the way he wants to stay near you, but does not know how to let that need be visible. This is one of the most hidden truths about what he feels after intimacy. He may not only feel satisfied, he may feel softened. And softness can scare him. Because softness asks him to stop performing strength for a moment. It asks him to let the armor loosen. It asks him to admit that what happened did not only awaken his body, but touch something innocent and unguarded inside him. A part of him that may not have been allowed to exist openly for a long time. That part does not speak loudly. It whispers. It whispers, stay. It whispers, this feels safe. It whispers, do not turn this into something cold. It whispers, there is something here that deserves gentleness. But if he has never been taught to trust that whisper, he may silence it. He may cover tenderness with logic. He may cover tenderness with distance. He may cover tenderness with humor. He may cover tenderness with physical language, because physical language feels safer than emotional truth. This is why he may say less when he feels more. Because tenderness does not always feel masculine to the old self. The old self may be comfortable with pursuit, desire, confidence, control. But tenderness can feel like surrender. It can feel like weakness. It can feel like the beginning of needing someone. And if he has learned to fear need, then tenderness becomes dangerous. Not because tenderness is dangerous, but because tenderness reveals need. The need to be close. The need to be accepted. The need to be held in a space where he does not have to prove anything. The need to feel emotionally safe with someone who has already touched the hidden part of him. And that need may be the very thing he has spent years denying. This is why he may not call tenderness by its real name. He may call it comfort. He may call it a good connection. He may call it chemistry. He may call it peace. He may call it nothing at all. But the soul knows when tenderness has entered. The soul knows when desire becomes gentle. The soul knows when the body's hunger turns into the heart's quiet recognition. The soul knows when the moment is no longer only about wanting, but about caring. And that is what frightens him. Because caring changes everything. If he only wanted you, he could keep the story simple. If he only felt attraction, he could place the experience inside a safer category. If he only desired the moment, he could tell himself it ended when the moment ended. But if tenderness is there, then the connection has crossed a line. Now it is personal. Now he is not only thinking about the experience, he is thinking about you, your presence, your softness, your trust, your energy, the way you made him feel, the way his own heart behaved when he was close to you. That can humble him, because tenderness often shows him that the part of him he thought was hardened is not dead. It may be buried, it may be guarded, it may be afraid, but it is still alive. And intimacy may have awakened it before he was ready to admit it existed. This is why tenderness can feel shocking after intimacy. He may expect desire to fade into calm, but instead, desire turns into warmth. He may expect to feel complete, but instead he feels connected. He may expect the body to relax, but instead, the heart begins to speak. And the heart does not speak in the same language as pride. Pride says, stay in control. The heart says, let this matter. Pride says, do not reveal too much. The heart says, something real happened. Pride says, keep it simple. The heart says, it is not simple anymore. That inner conversation can make him uneasy. Because now he is not only dealing with you, he is dealing with the parts of himself that awaken because of you. He is dealing with the softness he may have judged in himself. He is dealing with the longing he may have buried. He is dealing with the possibility that the tenderness he feels is not an accident, but a message from the hidden heart. A message that says, you are not as numb as you thought. You are not as detached as you pretend. You are not only a man of desire. You are also a man who longs to be emotionally met. That message can feel both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it reconnects him to his humanity. Terrifying because it asks him to stop hiding from it. And this is where he may struggle the most. Because tenderness after intimacy requires a different kind of courage than desire. Desire may require boldness, but tenderness requires honesty. Desire can move toward the body, but tenderness must move toward the heart. Desire can be intense without being vulnerable, but tenderness is vulnerability in its quietest form. That is why he may protect it. He may keep it private. He may hide it under calmness. He may express it indirectly. He may show care in small ways while refusing to explain what those small gestures mean. Maybe he lingers longer than he intended. Maybe his voice becomes softer. Maybe he checks on you without making it sound emotional. Maybe he holds you for 1 second more than necessary. Maybe he remembers little details afterward. Maybe he becomes unusually careful with your feelings, even while pretending he is still unaffected. These small gestures can be the language of unnamed tenderness. Because he may not know how to say, I feel gentle toward you. That sentence may feel too exposed. He may not know how to say, something in me wants to protect this. That may feel too revealing. He may not know how to say, I feel close to you in a way I did not expect. That may feel too much like surrender. So he may express tenderness through fragments. A quieter tone. A careful touch. A sudden pause. A look he quickly hides. A message that seems simple but carries more feeling than the words admit. And if you are only listening for a dramatic confession, you may miss it. Because unnamed tenderness rarely enters the room loudly. It moves softly. It hides in the places where his guard slips. It appears in the small spaces between desire and distance. It shows up in the moments when he almost says more, almost stays longer, almost lets the softness become visible before fear pulls him back into control. That is the tragedy and beauty of this stage. The tenderness is real, but it is not yet free. It exists inside him like a truth still learning how to breathe. And when tenderness is not free, it can become confusing. He may be warm one moment and guarded the next. He may show softness, then act as if nothing happened. He may seem emotionally present, then disappear into practicality. He may give you a glimpse of the hidden heart, then close the door as soon as he realizes you may have seen it. Why? Because being seen in tenderness can feel more intimate than the intimacy itself. The physical body can be seen and still leave the emotional self hidden. But tenderness reveals the emotional self. It shows that he cares. It shows that he was moved. It shows that the closeness touched the part of him that is capable of attachment, devotion, protection, and love. And if he is not ready to be known there, he may hide. Not because tenderness is absent, because tenderness is too visible. This is why the divine masculine may struggle to name what he feels after intimacy. The words available to him may feel too small or too dangerous. Desire feels too shallow. Love may feel too big. Care may feel too vulnerable. Tenderness may feel too unfamiliar. So he remains caught between what he feels and what he can say. And in that gap, silence grows. But the tenderness still exists. It may exist as the warmth he feels when he remembers you. It may exist as the ache he feels when he pulls away. It may exist as the way he becomes protective of the memory. It may exist as the way he cannot quite return to emotional coldness after being close to you. Because once tenderness enters desire, desire is no longer alone. It has become emotional. It has become human. It has become a doorway into something deeper than pleasure. And this is where the divine masculine begins to change, even if slowly. Tenderness starts to soften the old story. It starts to challenge the belief that emotional distance equals strength. It starts to show him that being gentle does not make him weak. It starts to reveal that the heart can be open without being destroyed. But he may need time to believe that, because the old masculine identity may resist tenderness with everything it has. It may say, "Do not become attached." It may say, "Do not show too much." It may say, "Do not let this person matter." It may say, "Do not become soft." But the soul knows that softness is not the enemy. Softness is where healing begins. The problem was never that he became tender. The problem was that he was taught to fear tenderness as if it were a loss of power. But in truth, tenderness may be the first sign that something in him is becoming whole again. Because a heart that can feel tenderness is not weak. It is alive. A man who can feel tenderness after intimacy has not lost himself. He has found a part of himself that survival may have hidden. And that is why this chapter matters. The tenderness he does not know how to name may be the most honest feeling of all. Not the loudest. Not the easiest. Not the one he will confess first. But perhaps the one that reveals the deepest truth. That the intimacy did not only awaken his desire. It awakened his care. It awakened the part of him that wants to stay soft, even if fear tells him to harden again. It awakened the part of him that remembers closeness as something sacred, not something to consume and abandon. It awakened the part of him that knows the difference between touching a body and being touched by a soul. That is the shocking truth. After intimacy, what he may hide most is not his desire. It is his tenderness. Because desire can be worn like confidence. But tenderness has to be held like truth. And truth is what he is still learning how to carry. So if he becomes quiet, if he becomes careful, if he seems softer but unable to explain why, understand this layer. He may be standing inside a feeling he has no language for yet. A feeling that does not fit the old mask. A feeling that asks him to become more honest than he has been before. And maybe one day, if he is brave enough, he will stop calling it nothing. He will stop reducing it to chemistry. He will stop hiding it behind distance. And he will finally understand that the softness he felt after intimacy was not weakness. It was the hidden heart returning to life. That is where chapter 6 leaves us. With the understanding that tenderness is often the first emotional truth he feels after intimacy, and the last one he knows how to name. It rises quietly, asks for honesty, exposes the need beneath desire, and reveals that something in him has been touched far beyond the body. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for chapter 7. Because next we are going deeper into the shame he feels about needing you, and why the very closeness that makes him feel alive can also awaken the fear that needing someone makes him weak. Chapter 7. The shame he feels about needing you. What he may fear most after intimacy is not that he wants you. It is that he needs something he found with you. That is where this chapter begins. Because desire for the divine masculine can often be easier to admit than need. Desire can still sound strong. It can still sound controlled. It can still belong to the part of him that knows how to pursue, want touch, and move toward what attracts him. But need is different. Need exposes him. Need says something mattered. Need says something reached him. Need says something in him responded not only with the body, but with the heart. And that can awaken shame. Not because needing closeness is wrong. Not because tenderness is weakness. Not because intimacy should never touch him deeply. But because somewhere along the way, he may have learned that needing someone makes him less powerful, less independent, less masculine, less safe. So after intimacy, if he feels a need rising inside him, a need for your presence, your softness, your acceptance, your emotional safety, he may not know how to hold it with peace. He may feel it as danger. That is the hidden wound. He may have allowed himself to want you. But he did not expect to need what your closeness awakened. He did not expect to need the calm, the softness, the emotional permission, the feeling of being received, the feeling of being wanted without having to perform, the feeling of laying down the armor for just a moment and realizing how tired he had been from carrying it. That is what can shock him. Because after intimacy, he may not only miss the physical closeness. He may miss the version of himself who existed inside that closeness. The version who did not have to be so guarded. The version who could soften without being punished. The version who could feel without explaining. The version who could be close and still feel safe. And when he realizes he misses that, shame may rise. Why do I need this? Why do I want to feel that again? Why does her presence calm something in me? Why does being close to her make me feel like I can finally stop fighting? These questions can disturb him. Because they reveal that intimacy did not simply satisfy desire. It exposed a hunger. A deeper hunger. A hunger not only to touch, but to be met. Not only to be wanted, but to be accepted. Not only to experience pleasure, but to feel emotionally safe enough to let the hidden self breathe. And if he has spent years pretending he does not need that, then discovering the need can feel humiliating. That is where shame enters. Quietly. Privately. Sometimes cruelly. It may whisper, "You are too affected." It may whisper, "You are losing control." It may whisper, "You should not need anyone this way." It may whisper, "Do not let her see how much this matters." And if he believes that whisper, he may begin to hide. He may pull back from the very thing that made him feel alive. He may become colder than he actually feels. He may act like the closeness was less meaningful than it was. He may reduce the intimacy to something physical, because physical desire feels less exposing than emotional need. That is one of the deepest contradictions in this journey. He may need the closeness, and shame himself for needing it. He may miss your softness, and judge himself for missing it. He may feel emotionally nourished by your presence, and then punish himself internally for being affected by it. This is why the aftermath of intimacy can become so complicated. Because he is not only reacting to you, he is reacting to his own vulnerability. He is reacting to the discovery that something in him opened. He is reacting to the truth that his independence may not be as complete as he thought. He is reacting to the realization that there is a part of him that longs to be emotionally held, even if he has built his identity around never needing that. And that can feel like a threat to the old self. The old self says, "I am fine alone." The hidden heart says, "But I felt peace there." The old self says, "I do not need anyone." The hidden heart says, "But I felt safe with her." The old self says, "Do not get attached." The hidden heart says, "But something in me already remembers." This inner conflict can create shame because he may not yet know how to separate need from weakness. But they are not the same. Need is human. Weakness is not the same as vulnerability. Longing does not make him less masculine. Being emotionally affected does not make him less powerful. But if he has been conditioned to believe that real strength means needing nothing, then intimacy becomes a confrontation. It shows him that the heart still needs. The heart still reaches. The heart still recognizes safety when it finds it. And when the heart recognizes safety, it may want to return. That returning is what scares him. Because wanting the body is one thing. Wanting the emotional safety is another. The body can desire without surrendering the whole self. But emotional safety invites him into a much deeper surrender. It invites him to trust, to soften, to be seen, to admit that another person's presence can affect his inner world in a real way. That is difficult for a guarded man to admit. So he may try to make the need disappear. He may distract himself. He may become busy. He may act detached. He may convince himself that space is clarity. He may tell himself that needing closeness is dangerous. But the need does not vanish simply because he judges it. It becomes hidden. And hidden need often becomes heavier. Because now the heart is not only longing. It is longing in shame. It is longing while being told it should not long. It is reaching while being punished for reaching. It is remembering the intimacy while being forced to pretend the memory means nothing. That is a painful place to live. And it explains why he may become inconsistent after intimacy. Sometimes he moves closer because the need is real. Sometimes he pulls away because the shame is loud. Sometimes he reaches out because he misses the softness. Sometimes he disappears because he is afraid you will see how much he misses it. This is not emotional simplicity. This is inner conflict. The part of him that has been starved for tenderness wants to return to the place where tenderness was felt. But the part of him that learned to survive through control warns him not to go back. It tells him closeness will expose him. It tells him needing you will make him dependent. It tells him that if he admits how much the intimacy affected him, he will lose power. But what if he is not losing power? What if he is losing numbness? What if the shame is not protecting his strength, but protecting his fear? What if the need he is running from is not a weakness, but a sign that his hidden heart is finally alive enough to ask for something real? These are the questions his soul may begin asking. Because the soul does not shame need the way the ego does. The soul understands that every human being needs connection. Every heart needs safety. Every guarded part eventually longs for a place where it does not have to guard itself so fiercely. And when intimacy gives him even one moment of that kind of safety, something in him may begin to ache for more. Not because he is weak, because he is human. That is the truth he may not yet know how to accept. He may be ashamed that he wants to stay close after intimacy. Ashamed that your silence affects him. Ashamed that he thinks about how it felt to be held in that emotional field. Ashamed that he cannot reduce you to a moment because something about you has become linked to peace, tenderness, and recognition. This is why he may try to regain control by becoming distant. Distance can feel like proof that he is still independent. Silence can feel like proof that he is still composed. Acting unaffected can feel like proof that he has not been emotionally changed. But proof is not truth. Because he may look independent and still feel the ache. He may look composed and still be replaying the softness. He may look unaffected and still be privately confronted by how much he needed what happened. The outside can lie. The hidden heart does not. And the hidden heart may be saying, I needed that gentleness. I needed that closeness. I needed that moment where I did not have to be hard. I needed to feel wanted without feeling judged. I needed to feel safe inside my own vulnerability. That is not weakness. That is a wound speaking. A wound that has been waiting for gentleness long before this intimacy happened. A wound that may have learned to hide behind ambition, pride, emotional distance, control, silence, or physical desire. But after intimacy, when the armor softens, the wound may finally be felt. And when the wound is felt, shame may try to cover it. That is why this chapter is so important. Because what he feels after intimacy may not only be desire, tenderness, or longing. It may also be the shame of realizing he has needs he cannot keep pretending away. He may discover that physical closeness has awakened an emotional hunger. And if he does not know how to honor that hunger, he may judge it. But judgment does not heal hunger. Only honesty can begin to heal it. He has to learn that needing emotional closeness does not make him less of a man. It makes him more truthful. He has to learn that wanting to be held in tenderness does not destroy masculinity. It deepens it. He has to learn that the part of him that longs for safety is not a burden to be hidden, but a sacred part of him asking to be integrated. Because a man who cannot admit need may keep chasing desire without ever allowing love. He may keep touching bodies while hiding the heart. He may keep seeking intensity while avoiding intimacy. He may keep confusing control with peace. He may keep mistaking emotional distance for freedom. But real freedom is not the absence of need. Real freedom is being able to meet the truth of your need without shame. That is where his healing begins. When he can say, even if only to himself, yes, I needed that softness. Yes, I felt safer than I expected. Yes, the closeness mattered. Yes, I am afraid of how much it mattered. But feeling need does not make me weak. That inner admission can change everything. Because once shame loses its grip, tenderness no longer has to hide. Need no longer has to become distance. Longing no longer has to disguise itself as indifference. And intimacy no longer has to be treated like a threat to the self. It can become a doorway into honesty, a doorway into emotional maturity, a doorway into the part of him that is ready to stop surviving through denial. This does not mean he will immediately confess everything. It does not mean he will suddenly become open, healed, and fearless. Awakening is rarely that simple, but it does mean that the truth has begun to work inside him. Because once a man realizes that shame is not the same as wisdom, he begins to question the wall. And once he questions the wall, the heart has a chance. That is the sacred tension of Chapter 7. He may feel shame about needing you because your closeness revealed something he did not want to see. That beneath the desire, beneath the control, beneath the masculine mask, there is a human heart that longs for safety, tenderness, and emotional connection. And maybe that is what intimacy was always meant to reveal. Not just what he wants, but what he has been missing. Not just what excites him, but what nourishes him. Not just the hunger of the body, but the hunger of the soul. And if he is brave enough to stop shaming that hunger, he may discover that the need he feared was actually leading him back to life. Because needing connection does not make him broken. It means the part of him that still believes in love has not died. The part of him that can be moved is still alive. The part of him that can receive tenderness is still alive. The part of him that can soften after intimacy is still alive. And what is alive can heal. That is the message he may not yet be ready to say out loud, but his soul may already know. The shame is not the truth. The need is not the enemy. The tenderness is not weakness. And the closeness that made him feel exposed may also be the closeness that teaches him how to become whole. That is where Chapter 7 leaves us. With the understanding that after intimacy, he may feel shame not because the connection is wrong, but because it reveals needs he was taught to hide. And the deeper the intimacy goes, the more it may awaken the old wound that says needing someone makes him weak. But the soul knows better. The soul knows that what he needs may be exactly where his healing begins. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for Chapter 8. Because next we are going deeper into when intimacy becomes a mirror of his hidden heart. And why the closeness he tries to understand as desire may actually be showing him the deepest truth about who he really is. Chapter 8. When intimacy becomes a mirror of his hidden heart. There comes a point when intimacy is no longer just an experience. It becomes a mirror. That is where this chapter begins. Because the divine masculine may believe intimacy is about what happens between two bodies. He may believe it is about attraction, chemistry, desire, closeness, and the intensity of the moment. He may enter it thinking he is moving toward you, touching you, wanting you, responding to the physical pull that brought him close. But when the connection is deeper, intimacy does something he does not expect. It turns him back toward himself. It shows him what has been hidden inside him. The longing, the fear, the tenderness, the guardedness, the hunger for safety, the ache beneath his control, the softness he thought he had buried. That is why intimacy can become so unsettling. Because he may think he is only discovering what he feels for you. But he is also discovering what has been living inside him all along. And that discovery can be difficult to face. Because mirrors do not create what they reveal. They only show what is already there. Your closeness does not invent his hidden heart. It exposes it. Your tenderness does not create his longing. It gives his longing a place to rise. Your presence does not make him vulnerable from nowhere. It touches the vulnerability that was already waiting beneath the armor. That is the sacred function of deep intimacy. It reveals. It reveals the parts of him that desire alone could not explain. It reveals the emotional need beneath the physical pull. It reveals the wound beneath the distance. It reveals the truth beneath the mask. It reveals the man behind the role he has learned to perform. And sometimes, what he sees in that mirror frightens him. Because intimacy may show him that he is not as detached as he thought. It may show him that he is not as emotionally invulnerable as he pretends. It may show him that his strength has sometimes been built around avoidance. It may show him that the heart he thought was silent has been waiting for one safe moment to speak. That is a lot to see after intimacy. So he may resist it. He may tell himself it was only physical. He may tell himself he is overthinking. He may tell himself not to attach meaning to the moment. He may try to reduce the connection before the connection reveals too much. But the mirror does not disappear just because he looks away. The memory stays. The softness stays. The emotional echo stays. The quiet knowing stays. And in that echo, he begins to meet the hidden parts of himself. This is why intimacy can feel almost spiritual when it touches the soul. It is not only because two people come close. It is because closeness removes the illusion of separation inside him. The part of him that performs strength meets the part of him that needs tenderness. The part of him that chases control meets the part of him that longs to surrender. The part of him that says, "I do not need anyone," meets the part of him that whispers, "But I felt safe there." That inner meeting is powerful. And it can be terrifying. Because once he sees the hidden heart, he cannot completely unsee it. He may try to go back to the old version of himself. The version that stays composed. The version that keeps emotional distance. The version that treats intimacy as something physical and manageable. The version that knows how to want without admitting need. But after deep intimacy, that old version may not fit as comfortably. Because now he knows there is more beneath him. More tenderness than he admits. More longing than he shows. More fear than he names. More emotional hunger than he has allowed himself to understand. And that is what the mirror reveals. It does not only show him that he wants you. It shows him why he wants you. Does he want you because of the body alone? Or because something in your presence lets him rest? Does he want the moment only for pleasure? Or because the moment gave him a glimpse of emotional safety? Does he crave the intimacy because it was intense? Or because inside that intensity he felt accepted, softened, and seen? These questions can change everything. Because once intimacy becomes a mirror, desire stops being simple. Desire starts carrying information. It starts telling him what his soul has been missing. It starts pointing toward the parts of him that have been starved for connection, tenderness, honesty, and safety. That is the deeper meaning of this stage. The intimacy may reveal that he has been lonely in ways he never admitted. It may reveal that he has been guarded for so long, he forgot what ease feels like. It may reveal that he has mistaken emotional numbness for peace. It may reveal that what he called independence was sometimes fear wearing a stronger name. And when he sees that, he may feel exposed. Not exposed because you did something wrong. Exposed because truth has entered the room. The truth that he wants more than intensity. The truth that he needs more than control. The truth that the body was not the only part of him reaching. The truth that his hidden heart is not dead. This is where intimacy becomes a mirror of his soul. Because the soul does not only show him what is beautiful, it also shows him what is unhealed. It shows him the wound that pulls away, the shame that hides tenderness, the fear that confuses closeness with danger, the pride that would rather call the connection physical than admit it has become emotionally meaningful. And he may not like seeing those things. He may not like seeing how quickly he becomes guarded after softness. He may not like seeing how much he wants closeness while fearing it. He may not like seeing how much your absence affects him after your presence gave him peace. He may not like seeing that he still carries a wound around being emotionally known. But this is what mirrors do. They reveal both the light and the shadow. The light is his capacity to feel deeply. The shadow is his fear of being seen in that depth. The light is his tenderness. The shadow is the shame he attaches to tenderness. The light is his longing for real intimacy. The shadow is the way he runs when intimacy becomes real. The light is his hidden heart coming alive. The shadow is the old armor trying to put it back to sleep. And after intimacy, both may rise at once. That is why his behavior can become inconsistent. He may feel drawn to you because the mirror shows him something sacred. But he may also resist you because the mirror shows him something uncomfortable. He may crave the closeness because it awakens life in him. But he may fear the closeness because it exposes the places where he still does not feel healed. So he may stand at the edge of contradiction, wanting to come closer, wanting to disappear, wanting to be known, wanting to hide, wanting to feel the tenderness again, wanting to escape the vulnerability it brings. This contradiction is not random. It is the tension between awakening and defense. The soul is awakening. The defense is resisting. The soul says, "Look at what this intimacy has shown you." The defense says, "Turn away before you have to change." And that is the real reason intimacy can become so powerful. Because once he sees himself clearly, change becomes possible. Not guaranteed. Not immediate. Not easy. But possible. Before the mirror, he can keep believing the old stories. He can keep believing he is detached. He can keep believing he does not need emotional safety. He can keep believing intimacy is only physical. He can keep believing distance is strength and vulnerability is danger. But after the mirror, those stories begin to weaken. Because his own experience has contradicted them. He felt peace when the armor fell. He felt alive when the heart opened. He felt touched when he expected only desire. He felt more human when he allowed himself to be close. That experience becomes evidence. And once the soul has evidence, denial becomes harder. This is why he may think about the intimacy long after it happens. Not only because he remembers you, but because he is trying to understand himself through what happened with you. He is trying to understand why the moment affected him, why the tenderness stayed, why the silence afterward felt charged, why the closeness revealed a version of himself he cannot easily forget. He may not call it a mirror, but that is what it is. A mirror of the man beneath the mask. The man who wants to be strong, but also wants to be held. The man who wants control, but also longs to surrender safely. The man who acts guarded, but carries a heart that still responds to tenderness. The man who may seem distant, but is secretly moved by the places where he felt accepted. This is what intimacy can reveal. And maybe that is why it scares him. Because you did not only touch his body. You touched the truth he has been hiding from himself. You touched the place where he is still tender. The place where he is still afraid. The place where he still wants love, but does not fully trust it. The place where he still believes he must stay guarded to survive. And once that place is touched, the old life begins to feel less convincing. Not all at once. Not in a perfect straight line. But slowly, quietly, inwardly. He may begin to notice that the distance he once called safety now feels like loneliness. He may begin to notice that the control he once called strength now feels like exhaustion. He may begin to notice that the tenderness he feared is not destroying him, but revealing the part of him that still has the capacity to heal. That is the gift of the mirror. It does not only expose pain. It exposes possibility. It shows him that he can be softer, that he can be closer, that he can feel without falling apart, that he can be touched emotionally and still remain whole. That the hidden heart is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to come home to. But he has to choose whether he will face what the mirror shows. Because intimacy can reveal the truth, but it cannot force him to honor it. It can awaken tenderness, but it cannot make him mature enough to protect it. It can show him his hidden heart, but it cannot make him brave enough to live from it. That part belongs to him. And this is where the chapter becomes important for you too. Because when intimacy becomes a mirror of his hidden heart, it can be tempting to carry his awakening for him, to interpret every silence, to excuse every retreat, to wait endlessly for him to understand what his own soul is trying to show him. But his mirror is his responsibility. You can be the presence that awakens something. You can be the softness that reveals something. You can be the connection that shows him what is possible. But you cannot do his inner work for him. He must be willing to look. He must be willing to ask why closeness scares him. He must be willing to question why tenderness brings shame. He must be willing to notice why he pulls away from what feels safe. He must be willing to stop calling every emotional truth too much. Because the mirror only becomes healing when he stops running from what it reflects. That is the sacred truth. Intimacy becomes a mirror of his hidden heart when it reveals not only the depth of his desire, but the depth of his emotional world. It shows him the tenderness beneath his control, the fear beneath his distance, the longing beneath his silence, and the healing waiting beneath the shame. And what he does with that reflection determines everything. He can turn away and call it only physical. Or he can look deeper and realize that the physical moment was only the surface of a much larger truth. A truth about what he needs. A truth about what he fears. A truth about what his heart remembers. A truth about the man he becomes when he finally feels safe enough to be real. That is why this stage matters. Because the mirror does not only show him you. It shows him himself. And sometimes the most shocking truth after intimacy is not that he discovered how much he wants you. It is that he discovered how much of himself has been waiting to be felt. That is where Chapter 8 leaves us. With the understanding that intimacy, when it touches the soul, becomes a mirror of the hidden heart. It reflects his longing, his fear, his tenderness, his shame, and his capacity to heal. And once he has seen that reflection, even if he looks away for a while, something inside him knows the truth has already begun. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for Chapter 9. Because next we are going deeper into the moment he realizes it was not just physical, and why that realization becomes the turning point he can no longer easily deny. Chapter 9. The moment he realizes it was not just physical. There comes a moment when he can no longer call it physical and believe himself. That is where this chapter begins. Because for a while, the divine masculine may try to keep the experience in the safest category he knows. He may call it attraction. He may call it chemistry. He may call it desire. He may call it a powerful moment, a strong pull, something intense, something natural. Something that simply happened between two bodies. And at first, that explanation may feel believable. It gives him distance. It gives him control. It lets him stay protected. It lets him avoid the deeper question rising underneath. But eventually, if the intimacy touched the soul, the old explanation begins to collapse. Because physical desire may be intense, but it usually has an ending point. It rises. It burns. It satisfies. It fades. It may leave a memory, yes. But it does not usually rearrange the emotional atmosphere of a man's inner world. It does not usually follow him into silence. It does not usually soften him days later. It does not usually make distance feel heavier. It does not usually make him question who he becomes when he is close to someone. It does not usually expose tenderness, fear, shame, longing, and the need to be emotionally seen. So when all of that begins happening, he may slowly realize the truth. This was not just physical. That realization may not arrive as a dramatic confession. It may not come all at once. He may not wake up one morning and suddenly have perfect words for everything he feels. More often, it comes quietly. It forms in fragments. It rises in the moments when he is alone, when the distractions are gone, when the body is no longer leading but the heart is still remembering. Maybe it happens when he notices he is still thinking about you. Not just the closeness, not just the heat, not just the physical memory, but the feeling of being with you. The peace, the softness, the way his guard fell, the way your presence made him feel more human, the way the silence afterward carried more meaning than he expected. Maybe it happens when he tries to move on emotionally, but something inside him does not move with him. He may return to his routine. He may become busy. He may distract himself. He may tell himself it was only a moment. But then the memory returns. Not loudly. Not always painfully. But with a strange emotional weight. And he may think, why is this still with me? Why does this feel different? Why do I remember how safe I felt? Why does the absence of her energy feel so noticeable? Why does something in me feel changed when nothing outwardly has changed? That is when the truth begins pressing against the old story. Because the body may explain desire, but it cannot explain emotional imprint. The body may explain attraction, but it cannot explain why tenderness lingers. The body may explain pleasure, but it cannot explain why silence becomes sacred afterward. The body may explain the moment, but it cannot explain why the moment continues inside him. That continuation is what reveals the deeper layer. If it were only physical, it would likely remain in the past. But when it becomes emotional, it enters the present again and again. It returns through memory, through longing, through inner conflict, through the way ordinary life suddenly feels slightly less alive than the moment when his heart was open. That is why the realization can be unsettling. Because once he admits it was not just physical, he has to face what it actually was. Was it connection? Was it recognition? Was it attachment beginning to form? Was it the hidden heart waking up? Was it the soul responding before the mind was ready to understand? These are not small questions. They threaten the old identity. Because if it was just physical, he can stay the same. He can file it away. He can tell himself it happened, it felt good, and now life continues as before. Nothing has to change. Nothing has to be examined. Nothing has to be confessed. But if it was not just physical, then the moment becomes a message. A message about what he feels. A message about what he needs. A message about what he fears. A message about what kind of intimacy his soul is actually hungry for. And that message asks something of him. It asks for honesty. That is the part he may resist most. Because honesty after intimacy is not always about saying, "I want you." That may be the easier truth. The harder truth is saying, "This reached me." The harder truth is admitting, "Something happened inside me that I cannot reduce to the body." The harder truth is realizing, "I felt emotionally touched, and now I do not know how to return to being untouched." That is where his pride may fight back. It may tell him to stay logical. It may tell him not to overthink. It may tell him closeness always feels intense for a while. It may tell him he is imagining depth because the moment was powerful. But the soul is quieter than pride, and more persistent. The soul keeps asking, then why did it feel like recognition? Why did tenderness come after desire? Why did you feel exposed, not only satisfied? Why did her presence make the old armor feel unnecessary for a moment? Why does the memory feel less like pleasure and more like truth? These questions are difficult to escape, because they come from within him. No one has to force them. No one has to confront him. No one has to demand that he admit something. If the intimacy truly touched the hidden heart, the realization begins rising on its own. The heart starts revealing what the mouth is still too guarded to say. That is why this chapter is such a turning point. Before this moment, he can still simplify. After this moment, simplification starts to feel dishonest. Before this moment, he can say, "It was just desire." After this moment, he knows desire was only the first layer. Before this moment, he can believe he remained in control. After this moment, he realizes something in him was moved. And that realization may scare him. Because being moved means he was reachable. Being reachable means the wall was not absolute. And if the wall was not absolute, then he has to face the possibility that his emotional distance has never been true strength. Maybe it was protection. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was a survival pattern. Maybe it helped him avoid pain. But it also kept him away from the very closeness his soul has been craving. That is a painful truth. But it is also liberating. Because when he realizes it was not just physical, he also realizes something else. He is not numb. He can still be touched. He can still be awakened. He can still feel tenderness. He can still recognize something real. He can still be changed by intimacy that reaches beyond the surface. And that can become the beginning of healing. But first, it may feel like fear. Because awakening often feels like disruption before it feels like freedom. He may feel unsettled because the old categories are failing. He may feel exposed because the connection revealed too much. He may feel confused because he thought the body was leading, but now the heart is still involved. He may feel vulnerable because something about the intimacy has become personally meaningful. And personal meaning changes everything. A physical moment can be remembered, A meaningful moment can transform. A physical moment can pass through him. A meaningful moment can stay. A physical moment may satisfy desire. A meaningful moment may awaken longing. That is the difference he begins to feel. He may not have wanted to feel that difference, but once he does, he cannot unfeel it completely. He may still deny it outwardly. He may still stay silent. He may still act guarded. He may still try to protect himself from the consequences of the truth. But inwardly something knows. Something knows the intimacy did not end where the body ended. Something knows the closeness carried emotional weight. Something knows the softness afterward was not random. Something knows the memory keeps returning because it belongs to a deeper part of him. And this knowing may become uncomfortable because it asks him to become accountable to himself. Not to you first. To himself. He must ask, am I going to keep calling this physical because that is easier? Am I going to keep hiding behind desire because tenderness scares me? Am I going to keep pretending the distance means I am safe when it actually makes me lonely? Am I going to keep denying the emotional truth simply because I do not know what to do with it yet? These questions can mark the beginning of emotional maturity. Because maturity begins when a man stops lying to himself about what has touched him. It does not mean he will immediately know how to respond. It does not mean he will instantly become available, open, consistent, or brave. Real inner change can be slow. The old defenses do not disappear in one moment. Shame does not evaporate because truth appears. Fear does not surrender just because the heart has spoken. But the realization matters. Because once he realizes it was not just physical, the old denial loses some of its power. He may still retreat. But now he knows what he is retreating from. He may still stay silent. But now he knows the silence is not empty. He may still call it complicated. But now he knows complicated means emotionally real. He may still pretend for a while. But pretending will cost him more than it used to. That is the hidden shift. Truth changes the cost of denial. Before truth, denial feels like safety. After truth, denial begins to feel like self-abandonment. Because now, every time he reduces the connection, some part of him knows he is betraying what he felt. Every time he acts unaffected, some part of him knows the intimacy did affect him. Every time he calls it physical, some part of him remembers the tenderness that followed. And that internal contradiction can become too heavy to carry forever. This is where he may begin to soften, even if slowly. Maybe he becomes more reflective. Maybe he becomes more careful with your energy. Maybe he reaches out in small ways. Maybe he stops pretending quite as convincingly. Maybe he starts noticing that the distance he created does not erase the truth. Or maybe, before he softens outwardly, he simply becomes more honest inwardly. And that still matters. Because the first confession is often not spoken to the other person. It is whispered inside the self. It sounds like, that meant more than I wanted it to. That reached me deeper than I expected. That was not just physical. I do not know what to do with this yet, but I know it is real. That is the turning point. Not because everything becomes easy afterward, but because the truth has finally found a place to stand inside him. And once truth stands inside him, the old story cannot fully dominate anymore. This is why chapter 9 is so important in the journey. It is the moment when the divine masculine begins to recognize that intimacy was not simply something he experienced. It was something that revealed him. It revealed the tenderness beneath his desire, the need beneath his confidence, the fear beneath his retreat, the hidden heart beneath the mask. And when he sees that, he begins to understand that the physical closeness was only the doorway. What entered through that doorway was meaning. And meaning cannot be treated like a passing moment forever. It asks to be honored. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not without resistance. But eventually, the soul keeps returning him to the same truth. This was not just the body. This was the heart remembering. This was the soul recognizing. This was the hidden self being touched. That is the shocking truth. He may have thought intimacy would prove his desire, but instead it revealed his depth. He may have thought the moment would satisfy something temporary, but instead it awakened something sacred. He may have thought he could leave the experience behind. But instead, the experience followed him inward, asking him to become more honest than he has ever been. And when a man reaches that realization, he stands at a sacred threshold. He can continue to run from what the intimacy revealed. Or he can let the revelation change him. He can keep reducing the moment to desire. Or he can admit that desire became the doorway to emotional truth. He can hide behind the old mask. Or he can begin becoming the man who is brave enough to face what his heart already knows. That is where Chapter 9 leaves us. With the understanding that the moment he realizes it was not just physical is the moment the old story begins to break. The body may have started the experience, but the heart carried it forward. And once the soul has recognized meaning inside intimacy, he can no longer honestly return to the belief that nothing deeper happened. And if this chapter spoke to you, stay with me for Chapter 10, because next we bring everything together with the sacred truth about what he feels after intimacy, and why the feelings he may hide the most can become the very doorway to his deepest healing. Chapter 10. The sacred truth about what he feels after intimacy. In the end, what he feels after intimacy may not be something he can explain right away. That is where the final chapter begins. Because for the divine masculine, intimacy can open a door before he is ready to walk through it. It can touch the body first, but then reach the heart. It can begin as desire, but become memory. It can feel like closeness in the moment, but become revelation afterward. And the sacred truth is this. What he feels after intimacy is not always simple. It may not be only satisfaction. It may not be only attraction. It may not be only physical release. It may not be only the end of a moment. Sometimes, after intimacy, he feels the beginning of something he does not know how to name. A tenderness. A fear. A longing. A quiet ache. A strange emotional exposure. A sense that something inside him has been touched beyond the body. And that is what shocks him. Not the intimacy itself, but what remains after it. Because when intimacy is only physical, it may fade into memory. It may become a moment he remembers, but not a moment that transforms him. It may give pleasure, but not necessarily awakening. It may touch the surface, but not the hidden self. But when intimacy carries soul connection, something different happens. It stays. It stays in his silence. It stays in his body. It stays in the way he remembers your presence. It stays in the way ordinary life feels slightly different afterward. It stays in the way he cannot fully return to the version of himself who believed he was untouched. That is the part he may never say clearly. He may not say, "I still feel you." He may not say, "That moment changed something in me." He may not say, "I thought it was physical, but now I know it reached my heart." He may not say, "I am scared because I felt safe with you." But his silence may carry the weight of those truths. And this is where the entire journey comes together. The moment after intimacy revealed more than the moment itself. His silence was not always emptiness. Physical closeness became emotional exposure. What he replayed alone was not only the body, but the feeling. He pulled away because closeness touched something he did not know how to protect. He felt tenderness he could not name. He felt shame about needing something he found with you. Intimacy became a mirror of his hidden heart. And finally, he began to realize it was never just physical. All of it was leading here. To the sacred truth. That intimacy, when it touches the soul, becomes a doorway. A doorway into the parts of him he has avoided. A doorway into the tenderness he has hidden. A doorway into the fear he has carried. A doorway into the longing he has judged. A doorway into the heart he thought he could keep asleep. And that doorway can frighten him. Because the divine masculine may be able to handle desire before he can handle emotional truth. He may be able to move toward the body before he can admit what the body awakened in the soul. He may be able to accept passion before he can accept tenderness. He may be able to feel closeness before he can live honestly with the vulnerability that closeness reveals. That is why he may seem conflicted. He may want you and fear what wanting you means. He may miss you and still stay silent. He may feel tenderness and hide it behind distance. He may replay the intimacy and still pretend he is unaffected. He may know it was not just physical and still not know how to confess it. This does not mean you should ignore your own heart. This does not mean you should wait endlessly for someone who refuses to grow. This does not mean you should confuse inconsistency with devotion. This does not mean his silence should become your prison. Because your soul matters too. Your peace matters. Your clarity matters. Your emotional safety matters. Your ability to be loved openly, consistently, and honestly matters. The truth of his inner world does not erase the truth of your needs. That is important, because sometimes when you understand his fear, you may be tempted to carry it for him. You may be tempted to excuse every silence, explain every retreat, soften every wound, and wait for him to finally become the man his soul is asking him to become. But his awakening is his responsibility. You can be the mirror. You can be the softness. You can be the moment that touched something real. You can be the presence that awakened his hidden heart. But you cannot do his healing for him. He must choose whether he will face what intimacy revealed. He must choose whether he will keep running from tenderness. He must choose whether he will keep reducing soul connection to desire. He must choose whether he will keep confusing emotional distance with strength. He must choose whether he will honor the truth that rose inside him after intimacy. Because the deepest transformation does not happen only because someone feels something. It happens when someone becomes brave enough to live differently because of what they feel. That is where his healing begins. When he stops treating tenderness like weakness. When he stops treating need like shame. When he stops treating vulnerability like danger. When he stops calling the heart's awakening a problem. When he realizes that being touched emotionally does not make him less masculine. It makes him more whole. Because a man is not powerful because he feels nothing. A man is powerful when he can feel deeply and still stand in truth. A man is not strong because he hides his tenderness. A man is strong when he can protect what is tender without denying it. A man is not free because he needs no one. A man is free when he can admit what his heart needs without becoming ruled by fear. That is the sacred lesson intimacy may be trying to teach him. Not just how to want, but how to feel. Not just how to touch, but how to be touched. Not just how to experience closeness, but how to honor what closeness reveals. And maybe that is the most shocking truth about what he feels after intimacy. He may feel more human than he expected. More vulnerable. More open. More afraid. More tender. More connected to something inside himself that he thought was gone. He may feel the old armor cracking. And even if he tries to repair it, even if he tries to return to silence, even if he tries to act as if nothing changed, something inside him may already know. The body was only the beginning. The heart carried the truth. The soul remembered what the mind tried to deny. And once the soul remembers, the old life cannot stay completely the same. That is why this journey ends with hope. Not a hope that asks you to abandon yourself. Not a hope that tells you to wait without boundaries. Not a hope that makes excuses for emotional absence. But a sacred hope. The hope that what is real has a way of revealing itself. The hope that tenderness, once awakened, can become healing. The hope that the heart, once touched, can begin to remember its own courage. The hope that even a guarded man can one day stop running from the truth that was always trying to bring him home to himself. Because intimacy is not always the end of desire. Sometimes it is the beginning of awakening. Sometimes it is the moment that shows him where he is still afraid. Sometimes it is the mirror that reveals the hidden heart. Sometimes it is the silence that teaches him what words have not yet dared to say. Sometimes it is the sacred doorway through which he finally meets the part of himself that has been waiting to feel again. And if he is brave enough to walk through that doorway, he will not lose himself. He will find himself. The self beneath the pride. The self beneath the fear. The self beneath the silence. The self beneath the old story that told him softness was dangerous and emotional truth was weakness. He will find the man who can love without hiding. The man who can desire without denying tenderness. The man who can feel closeness without turning it into fear. The man who can look at what intimacy awakened and say, "This is not something I need to run from. This is something I need to understand." And for you, let this be the message. If intimacy left you questioning, come back to your own center. Do not measure your worth by his ability to speak. Do not shrink your heart to fit inside his silence. Do not confuse his fear with your failure. Do not believe that being deeply felt and being openly chosen are always the same thing. You deserve more than hidden tenderness. You deserve truth that can breathe in the open. You deserve a love that does not only feel deeply in silence, but shows up with maturity, courage, and care. And if this connection touched something sacred, let it awaken you too. Let it remind you that your body is sacred. Your heart is sacred. Your softness is sacred. Your ability to love deeply is not a weakness. Your desire for honesty is not too much. You are not here to chase someone into their awakening. You are here to become so rooted in your own truth that what is meant for you can meet you there. So if he felt something after intimacy, let the truth work inside him. And if you felt something too, let it bring you closer to yourself. Because the deepest intimacy is not only the intimacy between two people. It is the intimacy of finally being honest with your own soul. And that is where everything changes. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments. It was more than physical. Like this video if it gave you clarity. Subscribe to the channel for more deep divine masculine, intimacy, and soul connection insights. And share this video with someone who needs to understand that sometimes the most powerful truth after intimacy is not what he says. It is what he silently begins to feel.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.